Pekin Community High School District 303 Board of Education regular meeting is now in session. Would you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, I do have one change to the agenda tonight. I'd like to call your attention to item 6.2, which is a policy for the second reading. It relates to policy 3:5.0. The chairperson, Mrs. Oheimer, has decided to pull this policy for further consideration and will be brought back for approval at a future date. That said, the next item on the agenda is the roll call. Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Allison Drini.
Here.
Hill. Here. Oheimer.
Here.
O'Neill. Rui.
Here.
Wrigley.
Here.
Howard.
Here. We do have the necessary quorum and we can continue with board business. But before I do, I would like to share with you, as most of you know, Mr. O'Neill had emergency surgery on Thanksgiving Day. And I spoke to him earlier today and he wanted me to express his regrets that he couldn't be here tonight and also his best wishes. So I know that we're all thinking about Mr. O'Neill as he recuperates. Next item on the agenda is we will conduct a public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education of Pekin Community High School, District Number 303, Tazewell County, Illinois, to sell $11,321,000 worth of school fire prevention and safety bonds. The purpose of those safety bonds is for conforming the existing facilities of the district that house students to the building code promulgated by the State Board of Education of the State of Illinois by altering and reconstructing said facilities and having equipment purchased and installed therein. All persons desiring to be heard have an opportunity to present written or oral testimony with respect thereto. We'll begin the process by asking for comments from the members of the Board of Education first. Are there any board members who would like to address this issue? Hearing none, we'll move on. Is there anyone in the audience tonight who would like to address this issue, either orally at the podium or in written form? All persons desiring to be heard have been given an opportunity to present oral and written testimony with respect to the proposed issuance of bonds. At this point, I would be seeking a motion and a second to adjourn the hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Motion by Mrs. Hoheimer, second by Mr. Hill to adjourn the hearing. Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Oheimer.
Aye.
Hill. Aye. Allison Drini.
Aye.
Rui.
Aye.
Wrigley.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. The hearing is adjourned. Next item on the agenda would be the approval of minutes. Those minutes being the Labor Management Relations Committee meeting of October the 2nd. We have the Policy Committee, the regular board meeting, and the closed session meeting of the board, and all those occurred on November the 24th. We have a special closed board meeting of December the 1st. We have a special board meeting and a closed session with it. Both of those occurred on December the 4th. And then, last but not least, we have a special closed board meeting of December the 8th. At this point, I'd be looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Questions, comments, changes? Hearing none, Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Boheimer.
Aye.
Hill. Alessandrini.
Aye.
Rui.
Aye.
Wrigley.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Minutes approved as presented. Moving along on the agenda, next item is communications, public comments, and participation. And as is our custom, we will begin with board applause. Tonight, if I could, I'll start with Mr. Rui.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I would like to recognize and congratulate the girls' high school basketball team. Is off to a great start. They recently, I think they had a loss in Canton, but up until that point, I believe they were 7-0, and as of December 3rd, they were actually ranked number 12 in the state, 4A. And I'd like to congratulate them. They seem to be improving every year, and it's great to see.
Thank you, Mr. Rui. How about Mr. Wrigley?
Yeah, the class of 1959 recently donated a bowed psaltery made by Philip Belcher to the Cultural Studies Department at Pekin High School. Interesting point of information is that it actually is made of materials from the Old West campus. And so on behalf of the board, we appreciate this gift.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. How about you, Mrs. Hoheimer?
Yes, the Pekin JROTC drill team finished in first place this weekend in Lincoln at their Quest drill competition. They defeated Richwoods, Limestone, and Manual. Yay.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer. How about you, Mr. Hill?
I'd like to congratulate 6 of our choir and band students who represented the school at the they represented the school at the All-State in January. The students auditioned in October, and the top players and singers throughout Central Illinois participated in the audition. These students will be attending the conference between January 28th and 31st at the Peoria Civic Center with hundreds of other students from around the state. So we'd like to congratulate Will Hoff, Kylie Ash, Amy Mansfield, Sarah McKenzie, Blake Markham, Emily Graham. So congratulations to those 6 students on their achievements with both choir and band.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. How about you, Mr. Alessandrini?
Mine's actually a commercial. The 50th annual Pekin Insurance Holiday Tournament will be held December 29th, 30th, and 31st here at the high school. The seedings were released today. Top seed is Lake Zurich. Number 2 seed is Peoria Central. Evanston received the 3rd seed, and Pekin received the 4th seed. Tournament passes are available for the entire tournament. For adults, $25, students and senior citizens, $15. A session pass is available for adults for $6, and students and seniors at $4. So we would encourage the community to come out and see some great basketball at the end of December.
Mr. Alessandrini, continue with your commercial. How long have you been involved in that process?
I don't remember.
Too long to remember, right?
About, actually, let's see.
Is it
28 years.
I was going to say, it's decades at least.
Yeah, 28 years.
Well, that's good that you're keeping it all together. Thank you. My board applause tonight is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot lately, and I want you to bear with me as I state the obvious. In the month of November and December, we approved minutes for 17 meetings. And there was a person who publicized those meetings, attended those meetings, and recorded those meetings. Similarly, we went to the III conference in Chicago, and this same person prepared the binders that we took with us, made all the reservations, and did all the things required to get us from here to there. Continuing on, we're in the midst of negotiations right now, and this same person made the binders, makes the negotiations, make notifications. He arranges all the snacks, he does the minutes. Every other word is minutes. And I'm not done yet, because we also have Central Illinois Valley Association activities, and he makes all those reservations. He keeps track of our continuing education units, and he also keeps track of our master board member points and helps with that process. I simply want to say to all of you that are listening to me tonight, that Mr. White is the busiest person I know. And yes, you can say it's his job, but you know what? He does it extraordinarily well. Mr. White, I want to tell you thank you, and I want to applaud you. Good job, sir. Next item, one of the highlights of the evening, is our student council report with Emily Pendleton. Emily's got a 1,000 kilowatt smile. You guys can't see it because her back's to you.
Thank you. Our canned food drive was very successful. We were able to feed 100 families around Pekin, North Pekin, and South Pekin, and that wouldn't have been possible without all the canned goods donated by all the students. We had 1/4 hour alone bring in over 1,000 cans, so there was great involvement with that. We've been wrapping up for the end of the semester. We just had our pizza party, giving out our awards and inviting people to come back and help us with next semester. And right now upstairs, we're actually doing the Santa calls for the District 108 children, and that will continue on throughout tomorrow. We also have our movie buyout coming up tomorrow on mandatory attendance to finish up the year with something fun for the juniors and seniors. And other than that, we're just wrapping up for the year and getting ready for what the new year brings us. Thank you.
Emily, for a great report. It's just a darn shame you can't find anything to do.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, we've got some very distinguished looking people sitting in the back of the room, and I think they're here to give us a special report. Please come forward, and the podium is all yours.
You're referring to me?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, he's halfway distinguished. I mean, no,
He's included.
he's basking in your glow, I think.
My name's Hope Wheeler, and I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. Thanks for having us here tonight to present the results of the audit. And Adam Pulley, the manager on the engagement, is here with me also. I'm going to just go over we issued several reports as a result of the audit. I'm going to go over some of those fairly quickly, so feel free if you want to jump in and stop me with a question, please do. First, I see that you have the bound report with you. I'm going to focus on this. This is the main financial statement. This financial statement, pages 1 through 3, is the crux of our audit, our results. Our opinion is actually on page 2. The opinion states that these financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting. So a clean or unmodified opinion. Pages 4 and 5 are the statement of net position, like a balance sheet in the corporate world, and then the right-hand side there, page 5, is the statement of activities. These two statements are on the modified cash basis, meaning it's your cash basis transactions, but then we adjust these statements for capital assets. Instead of those being expensed, they're capitalized here and depreciated. And then your long-term debt is shown as a liability here. You can see that in the current and long-term liability section. So just a summary of the statement of net position, you see your total assets of $43 million. Deferred outflows there is $73,000. Total liabilities of around $5 million, primarily made up of your bonds payable. Your assets are primarily made up of your capital assets, net of depreciation of $23 million. Then the net difference between your total assets and your total liabilities is your net position, which is the $38 million at the bottom of page 4. Page 5 then shows the change in your net position from last year to this year. So overall, the third line from the bottom on page 5, your net change in position was to increase net position by $1.9 million for fiscal year ended June 30, 2014. These two statements are with all your funds together. It excludes activity funds, but all the main funds of the district are in these two statements. On page 6 and 7, here we have the fund statements. These are on the strictly cash basis. So in these statements on 6 and 7, and then further back on 9 and 10, capital assets aren't capitalized. They're shown as expenses, and the debt is shown as a revenue when proceeds are received, and then when you make payments, that's shown as an expense. So then you just have your cash and investments on your balance sheet here, and essentially no liabilities. If you remember from previous years, that first column there, the general fund, that's the way we're required to show it for reporting purposes, but that includes your educational fund, your operation and maintenance fund, your working cash fund, and your tort fund. So those are all combined there, and in the back there's a combining schedule so you can see each of the individual funds that make that up. So the general fund is always a major fund, has to be shown in its own column. The debt services fund qualified as a major fund, along with the fire prevention and safety fund. So those three are shown separately there. Then other governmental funds, those are non-major funds that get grouped together. Included in there is the transportation, retirement, and capital projects fund. Let's look at page 9 and 10. That is the statement of revenues collected, expenditures paid, and changes in fund balance for each of those major funds and the other governmental funds. Then you can see the general fund in that first column. That was a net positive increase of revenues over expenses of $1 million approximately for the fiscal year. And you can see that you end in a positive fund balance of $15 million. In fact, all your fund balances across the bottom line, they're all positive fund balances. I don't always see that, so I have to point that out. The debt services fund, the next column, you can see in that case, expenditures exceeded revenues. So the expenditures include your payments of principal and interest on long-term debt. So that had expenses over revenues of the $383,000 for the fiscal year. And then you have the positive fund balance of $26,000. Fire prevention and safety, the $1.2 million, the third line from the bottom there, increasing that fund balance to $1.8 million. And then all your other governmental funds I mentioned netted to about break even there, but a $75,000 net income for the fiscal year. On page 12, I mentioned the activity funds aren't on the front statements. On page 12 is a summarization of all the activity funds and the balance at the end of the fiscal year. Next, we go into the footnotes. I'm not going to go through each of those. There were no new required disclosure and governmental accounting standards this year, so if you're familiar with these statements, they should look very comparable last year. I will point out, I guess, one highlight on page 21 and 22. That's a footnote about long-term debt, and as you're aware, there was new debt issued in 2014. So this footnote explains each of the bond issues in detail, and then when the future maturity dates of those bonds are, the principal and interest. Following the footnotes, there is what's called required or supplementary information. On page 37, I thought I'd point out that is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund Schedule of Funding Progress. That's there's a new governmental standard you may be aware of that's coming up to be implemented next fiscal year. And in a lot of cases, governmental entities have a new liability they're going to have to report on their financial statements. But I just wanted to point out for you, if you see that 12/31/13 actuarial valuation date, your unfunded actuarial accrued liability is not a positive number. So that means if you were on the accrual basis, you wouldn't be recording this liability because you're not unfunded. The next page, 38, I wanted to point out that page is probably of interest to you also because this page shows a required schedule of the general fund budget to actual. So you can see the total revenue budgeted of the 19 million and actual came in of 21. And then expenditures, you stayed under budget there, 18 million budgeted, and the 20.9 million of actual expenditures. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's over budget, but remember that in these statements we have to include on behalf payments from TRS. So those are included as a revenue and expense that aren't part of the budget. So the net change for the fiscal year is the $1 million I mentioned earlier. That's all I was going to go through on the bound financial statement. We also issue the annual financial report that the AFR, that ISB requires. And this really is the same information, just in the format required by ISBE. What I wanted to point out in that report is because you spend over $500,000 in federal funds, you have to have a single audit each year. This year, the federal expenditures were right around $1 million. And we go through a process to determine what to test. The two federal programs we were required to test this year were your Title I low-income program and your IDEA flow-through special education program. So we issue 2 other reports that are connected to the AFR because of the government auditing standards requirements. Those are both clean or unmodified opinions also. There are a couple of findings at the back of the annual financial report that I was going to go over with you. Finding 1, this is on page 51 of the annual financial report. The first finding just reports to you that there were a couple of journal entries required as part of the audit process. One in regards to the bond refunding transaction. There was a non-cash component to it that we needed to record. And then there was another entry that was required related to something that wasn't recorded really on the cash basis of accounting. So both of those have been reviewed with management, and I don't think those would occur again in the future. The second finding relates specifically to the federal programs we had to test. And one thing we noted in our IDEA testing, the special education testing, was there was not a review process in place over the reports. And so we're always looking for a second set of eyes reviewing reports. So we recommend that review occur and that be documented prior to submission of the reports. Those were the only findings at the report level. We did issue an additional management letter, we call it, with just a few other suggestions noted. Some suggestions for considered improvements in internal controls. One in regards to making sure your checks are issued in sequence. That's just a good internal control. Didn't find any issues, but just wanted to point that out for consideration. Also, there are a few bank accounts, smaller bank accounts that aren't on the ledger, and sometimes having those on the ledger would just perform an additional control. And then also there's a comment in there about passwords. With all the data breaches you see out there nowadays, the passwords is just a good internal control, and no one likes to change their password frequently, but it's something to consider doing just for additional protection. And then there's a comment about considering a fixed asset module to track all your fixed assets in detail with the depreciation. That was a whirlwind run through of the entire audit. Does anyone have any questions on anything they've read or seen or heard?
Hope, with respect to the special ed report being reviewed by someone prior to submission, who typically would do that?
Typically, if it's prepared by like a business office or someone else, like a director of special education, might review it, or even a superintendent, or depending on the district, sometimes it's a superintendent reviewing it.
Okay, so it kind of depends on the hierarchy within the district.
It does.
So we'd be covered, right?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. We've actually already changed that, and Superintendent DeVitas is signing off on that report. I prepare it, he's signing it, and then I submit it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Hope? I want to thank you for an incredibly thorough report. You folks always do a great job, and we appreciate you doing it. And I'd just like to make a tongue-in-cheek comment. given the state of education funding within the state of Illinois, I think your first name is exceedingly appropriate.
That's a good name for an auditor, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here tonight. Continuing on, this is also the point where members of the public can make a comment before the board on a non-agenda item. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to make a comment before the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to approval of claims.
Mr. President, I move for the payment of monthly warrants in the amount of $3,218,171.58 per summary information found on page 54, detailed information on board bills on page 80, beginning on page 83, and manual checks on page 122.
Thank you, Mr. Alessandrini. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer. We have a motion by Mr. Alessandrini, second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Are there questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Hoheimer,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Monthly warrants will be paid. You'll also find district investments, medical care report, financial statement, board bills, and manual checks on pages 57 through 122. Next item on the agenda. We have a request for closed session regarding the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. Also, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, and the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the public body. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Hoheimer,
Aye.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. At the close of the closed session, the board will return to this boardroom and continue on with board business. We'll be out of the room as short as possible. Record indicates the Board of Education is back in session at 7:24 p.m. Continue on with the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Before I call for a vote, is there a particular item in that consent agenda that a board member would like to pull out for a separate vote? If so, now's your opportunity. Hearing none, I call for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Thank you, Mrs. Hoheimer.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Alessandrini. Mr. White, are you ready to call the roll, please?
Hoheimer,
Aye.
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Present.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Consent agenda approved as presented. Next item on the agenda is policy for a second reading, and as I indicated earlier, that's been pulled for further consideration. It'll be brought back at a future date. So the next item is policies for a first reading. Mrs. Hoheimer.
Yes, the policy committee is presenting 12 policies for a first reading. Please note that 13 additional policies listed on the page number to the right are not included because the suggested press changes considered during review or confined to just footnotes, legal citations, and/or administrative procedures. Because current district policy differs significantly from the press version, and it was decided not to make suggested textual changes, or because current district policy was deemed sufficient without suggested press changes to the text. In addition, 2 policies were held over to a future committee meeting to allow time for review for our board attorney or by the administrative team. Policy 2.20, 2.140, 4.110, 4.120, 5.10, 5.185, 5.220, 5.250, 5.260, 6.110, 7.20, and 7.240, all for first read.
Seeing as that motion comes from committee, the second is not required. So therefore, I would ask if there's any questions, comments, or discussion regarding these policies. Hearing none, Mr. White, would you call the roll, please?
Holheimer,
Aye.
Alessandrini.
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Policies, as mentioned, will be held over for a future date and action thereon. Next item, permission to destroy verbatim recordings of closed and special closed board meetings dating from January 5th through June 24th, 2013.
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Alessandrini.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. Question, comment, discussion? Hearing none, Mr. White, are you ready?
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Holheimer,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Those recordings will be destroyed. Next item, student membership in the Tazewell County School Employees Credit Union. Mr. DePatis?
This is the letter that I brought example of last month, and just want the board approval so that we can send that. It allows our students to be able to become members of the Tazewell County School Employees Credit Union. There's no requirement, other than, the only requirement is that if a student decides they want to open an account, they have to open it with $25, and it's just an opportunity for them to have a banking area.
Thank you, Mr. DePatis. At this point, I'd be looking for a motion to recommend board approval of student membership in the Tazewell County School Employees Credit Union as presented.
Motion for approval.
Mr. Wrigley? Thank you. Second? Mrs. Hoheimer? Motion by Mr. Wrigley, second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing none, Mr. White, are you ready?
Wrigley,
Aye.
Holheimer,
Aye.
Alessandrini.
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Student membership approved as presented. Next item on the agenda, we have a clinical affiliation agreement between Pekin Hospital and Pekin Community High School District 303. Mr. DePatis.
You'll see on, starting on page 193, I believe that's right. Yes. That agreement is with Pekin Hospital. It covers our CNA students so that they're able to do their clinical hours at the hospital. All of the things that are in there are things that we already do. The only thing that's in there that is an additional is the liability insurance, which will be a cost to the district of about $250 annually. Otherwise, all those other things, as far as the TB tests and the physicals, those things are all, the students are already doing all of those things. So I'm just requesting approval for that so that we can continue that relationship with the hospital.
Thank you, Mr. DePatis. At this point, I'd be looking for a motion to that effect.
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Alessandrini. Second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Motion by Mr. Alessandrini, second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Questions, comments, or discussion? I think that's money well spent. That sounds like a real bargain.
The only thing that I would like to add is that agreement has been vetted through our attorney on multiple occasions, back and forth between the hospital's attorney and our attorney.
Thank you, Mr. DePatis. No further comments. Mr. White, are you ready?
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Holheimer,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Wrigley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Affiliation agreement approved as presented. Next item on the agenda, one we've been waiting for all evening.
Drum roll, please.
Yes. Play the Psalter. Approval of new courses for the 2015-2016 school year. Dr. Owens.
Last month, we talked about 13 new courses that we are recommending for approval for the 15-16 school year. They include contemporary sculpture, which is a modified version of the sculpture class that we have, with an addition of a studio ceramics elective. The CTE department, which is converted the traditional marketing course to a sports and entertainment marketing, and also then combined our current software applications course in with our keyboarding to create a 2-semester course called Software Applications 1 and Software Applications 2 that we think will be more conducive to students' needs moving forward, as well as a new Project Lead the Way course called Computer Integrated Manufacturing, which is a year-long CNC class. So those are out of the CTE department. In addition, we are going to hopefully offer an additional AP course in our English department. Currently, our students take an AP course their senior year, and we're going to split those into 2 years, so they will take AP literature their junior year and move into AP language their senior year, so they have an additional AP course, which brings our AP offerings to 12. We're really proud of that. Our math department, in collaboration with our CTE department, has created a course called Algebra Tech, which is going to be a team-taught course with integrated Algebra 1 and 2, team-taught with a survey of CTE. So we're excited to offer that to freshmen to see if we can integrate some hands-on activities with core math skills and help students see the relevance in the math that they are learning, as well as introduce them to everything we have to offer down here in the Career Tech Ed Center. So we're really excited about that. The Social Studies Department has added an additional online economics course. So we have quite a few economics selections, one of them now being online. That's the 3rd online class that we've now offered at Pekin High. We've offered online U.S. history, which has gone every year for several years. And we've also offered online research writing, which typically goes in the summer of the last 2 years. It's offered during the school year, but we have success over the summer. And then in our special ed department, we are offering 2 new cross-categorical classes, Steps to Success, which is a freshman-sophomore 1-semester class, and a junior-senior level transition to adulthood class. So that rounds out our new course offerings for the school year. I'm just asking for approval so that we can hopefully get students registered for those starting in January.
Thank you, Dr. Owens. At this point, I'd be looking for a motion to recommend board approval of the new courses for the 2015-2016 school year as presented.
So moved.
Is that Mr. Wrigley? Second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Motion by Mr. Wrigley and second by Mrs. Hoheimer. Are there questions, comments, or discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment if I could.
Please do.
I want to commend, congratulate the staff, the department chairpersons, and the building principal and their staff, and along with Dr. Owens. If you look at these courses, every year we continue to offer new courses. They're trying to keep up with the student interest and also with what's going on in the world around them. If you look at these courses, you can see that there's new offerings available for every level of student. It's not focusing on one level of student, and these classes are reacting to the needs of the students. This Algebra Tech class is something we've been looking for a long time to try to help kids understand the connection between the mathematics classroom and what they can do with it outside the classroom. And I know that the sports and entertainment marketing and software applications is a great effort on the part of the business department to bring students back to that area. So it just looks like some classes, but I'd feel like I wasn't doing a good job here if I didn't relate how much work goes into developing these things and how much that you can see by the classes that are on this list, that how many people are looking for ways to better serve our students. So it's a wonderful new set of classes, and I congratulate you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Rui. I'd like to make two comments. I've long believed that Pekin Community High School is the best kept secret in central Illinois. I hope I don't get in trouble saying this, but if you take Limestone, Morton, Metamora, and Washington, and add all their AP classes together, we offer more AP classes than those four schools combined. Right, Dr. Owens? And then the second comment that I would like to make, Mr. Rui made it far more eloquently than I could have, but I simply wanted to point out that the list of new classes covers the entire spectrum. We're not focusing on one section of our students. We collectively are working hard for all of our students, and that's exactly the way it should be. Are there any other comments?
Dr. Owens, I know you've probably said this a few times, and I apologize, I don't remember. The Algebra Tech class, is that going to be a 1-hour class?
It'll be a 2-hour class because they'll get a half credit for their algebra and they'll get a half credit for their CTE elective. So it'll be a blocked class that'll be a 2-hour class.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make one comment. Recently at the III conference in Chicago, I sat through, along with Mr. Hill and Mr. Howard, an interesting session on college and career readiness and PARCC assessment. I use that term interesting very loosely, but it's increasingly obvious that the state of Illinois and nationally, the push is to get kids to go to college. And being someone who graduated from college myself, I can appreciate that. But I also particularly appreciate the efforts that are being made in the CTE department, especially for things like computer integrated manufacturing. It proves that Pekin High School is not just going to follow the trend, that Pekin High School is dedicated to a fully encompassing education that can put you onto a track for success no matter which way our students choose. And so this is extraordinary. It's not just typical, it's not the same course changes that we see each year. This is above and beyond, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. Any other comments? Mr. White, have you caught up yet? Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Wrigley,
Aye.
Hillheimer,
Aye.
Allison Greenie,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. New courses approved as presented. And I think the excitement around it is incredible. Thank you, Dr. Owens.
Thank you.
Next item. Request permission to seek bids for various buildings and grounds projects. Mrs. Schaefer.
We are finally in a position tonight to be able to come to you to ask to seek bids for various buildings and grounds projects. As you know, this evening we had the public hearing on the bonds and which means that our health life safety work got approved. So we were very excited about that. It was a little over $9 million. So we've met with the O&M committee for several months now and discussed our 5-year plan of potential projects that we had on the docket and things that we kind of put on hold until we knew those health life safety funds had been approved. So now that we've gotten that approval, we're in a position to be able to ask tonight for 8 different projects to seek bids on. Those projects being the welding hoods project, a theater rigging project, which is actually supported by health life safety funds, the first half of the waterproofing of the stadium, the first phase of the softball field, 1/4 of the G building roof, updates to our E building, which is Hawkins Gym, the digital controls, the pillar entrance retaining wall, and our walk-in freezer and cooler in the cafeteria. Obviously, some of those projects are funded through health life safety, some of them are with local dollars, and tonight we asked to see bids for those projects, but knowing that if those projects come in above our expectation or what's been budgeted, we'll have a conversation at that time. But we are excited to be at least on the ground running now. We're trying to get some of these projects complete. So tonight my recommendation would be to ask board approval for, to seek bids for various buildings and grounds projects subject to provisions of the Prevailing Wage Act as presented.
At this point, I'd be seeking a motion to that effect. Thank you, Mrs. Holheimer. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Hill. Questions, comments, discussion?
Mr. Howard, would it be appropriate for me to make a couple statements now in advance of the report? Because I think it probably would be easier for people to know rather than wait.
I think it's exceedingly appropriate, and it might even initiate some conversation around it. Yes.
First of all, Ms. Schaefer did a wonderful job of explaining this, and she also worked tirelessly to get these amendments approved. So we owe her a great debt of gratitude for that. In terms of the projects that she outlined, the 8 projects that we want to seek bids on, 4 of those projects are going to be strictly district dollars, coming strictly out of district dollars. One of those being the softball field, phase 1, the G building, quarter of the G building, roof repair, retaining wall for the column entrance. As you can see, it's going to be similar to what we work was done in front of the parking lot. That wall is in danger of deteriorating even worse. And then, of course, the walk-in freezer. And obviously, we need to move forward on the roof and the retaining wall and the walk-in freezer. The softball facility, we've said all along, Mr. Wrigley has said this, I have said this, we're going to certainly seek bids, but we have to make sure those bids come in a place that we know we can afford that work. So that's what we're going to do with that. In terms of a combination of district funds and grant money or health, life, safety dollars, the welding hoods and the stadium maintenance repair are those 2 items that fit kind of into that category. And those, we are really committed to both those, obviously, but the stadium maintenance and repair needs to be done before the stadium deteriorates any further. So we're blessed that those amendments came through. The final 2 items that she discussed, the theater rigging and the building digital controls, are going to be health, life, safety dollars. So what they've done is they've come up with this 5-year plan, which is certainly fluid, but it is one where they're attacking the greatest need first and moving forward with that. And obviously there's dates on this document that you received. Those dates can change, things can go differently based on the need or based on what comes up. But in terms of those 8 items that they're going to bid on, I want to make sure that the board understood what the major funding stream was going to be for those items. Okay? So and that was what was discussed today. We did meet today. Ryan and I have been discussing that ongoing, and that's what we walked away from that meeting with today at 5 o'clock. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you board members might have. And if I don't know the answer, I know Mrs. Schaefer does.
Tim, on the spreadsheet that we have, 2015, there's 10 items listed. Are a couple of those merged together? Is that where we get the 8?
No.
Or which ones of those are we not?
3 of them were 2015, 16.
Like for instance, are you talking like, for example, the recrowning the football field?
Well, if I go down we got the welding hoods, the theater rigging, G building, corridor roofs, waterproofing, softball. Then we have G building, northwest section 1.
No, that's not one.
The corridor roofs aren't going out for bid, so you gotta skip over that one.
Okay,
Some of these blend over budget years because it's summer work, that'll be 15, 16. So it's the welding hoods, theater rigging, skip over corridor roofs, because
Okay.
that's under the limit. And then the waterproofing, the softball field.
Okay.
And then the first one under 15, 16, the G building, northwest section 1.
Okay.
Skip over the safety glass.
Okay.
The E building, digital controls, the retaining wall, and then the walk-in freezer floor.
I was just trying to figure out which ones we were skipping.
Okay.
Right.
That's all
Sorry if I.
Some of them are below the threshold of requiring us to go out for bid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clearly, there's a lot of conversation, consideration, thought, and effort behind this 5-year plan. And having been through this process in the past, I agree with Mr. Rui, and commendations can go in a pretty far circle in relation to this process. Any other comments or questions? Mr. White, you ready to call the roll?
Holheimer,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Alessandrini.
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Ridley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Bids will be sought. Next item, tax levy for 2014, Mrs. Schaefer.
On page 201 of your documents is the official certificate of tax levy form that gets filed with the county clerk. This is the same, these are the same figures that I presented last month. Nothing has changed. So our recommendation tonight would be to seek board approval for the 2014 tax levy with a total amount of $11,911,768 with detail indicated on the certificate of tax levy form as presented.
Motion for approval?
Thank you, Mr. Alessandrini. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Motion by Mr. Alessandrini, second by Mr. Hill. Questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing none, Mr. White, are you ready?
Alessandrini,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Holheimer,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Ridley,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Tax levy for 2014 approved as presented. Next item on the agenda, instructional materials fee waiver, Mrs. Schaefer.
Also, as we discussed last month, we brought to you the recommendation to extend the $75 instructional material waiver through the 2015-16 school year.
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. Thank you, Mrs. Holheimer. Motion by Mr. Wrigley, second by Mrs. Holheimer. Board approval for the instructional material fee waiver. Are there questions, comments, or discussion? Mr. White, are you ready?
Ridley,
Aye.
Holheimer,
Aye.
Alessandrini.
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rui,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. Motion carries. Fee waiver approved as presented. Next item on the agenda is reports. We begin, as usual, with Mr. Hill and resignations.
I have one resignation to report. That'll be Bob Neal, head coach for the boys golf program, effective November 24th, 2014. I'd like to thank Mr. Neal for all of his years of service to the golf team and all that he did for Pekin High School.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Well put. Next item, policy committee, Mrs. Holheimer.
We did not meet tonight. I am assuming we will probably meet in January,
That'll be next year, won't
next year.
it? Yeah. Next item, operations and maintenance committee, Mr. Rui. Did you get everything said you wanted to say?
I believe so, unless there's questions or if Mr. Ridley has something else to add.
No, I think you covered it.
That's just a testimonial of what a good job you did. Next item, labor management relations committee, Mr. DePatis.
We did meet earlier this month, and the limited agenda, we discussed potential calendar for next year, looking at the dates we're looking at for the 2015-2016 school year. That was basically the brunt of our discussion with that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. DePatis. Moving on, how about student achievement?
Student Achievement Committee, we met also earlier. We will meet again tomorrow. The last meeting we had, we took the issue of the potential 7-period day and broke into subcommittees to look at different parts of that situation. And we are going to be coming back, starting with, I think, 2 of the groups tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting to discuss those different subcommittees, the research that we've done to bring that information forward so that the group then can kind of look at options. The idea is that we'll look at options. The members of the committee will then go back to their departments, look at those options, have discussion, and rank those options to bring back to the next time, so we can kind of look at how we want to look at the different pieces in a ranked order, as opposed to saying, this is the option we want, and then trying to look at saying one option for each thing. We may have to say, well, this is what the number one option is, decided upon, but we may have to select the second best option to fit with one of the other options that goes through. So that process is in the works and where we're headed with that.
It's kind of a new twist on the old saying, two heads are better than one, right?
Yes.
I think it sounds like a great plan. Next item, 2015-2016 curriculum guide. Dr. Owens.
You have at your place the curriculum guide for the 15-16 school year. We have changed how we disseminate that and when that is created. We used to do those modifications over the summer. We've moved to actually doing them in accordance with the creation of new courses and approval of new courses, moving into the registration process then in January, as well as our incoming freshmen and meetings with parents and what's available. So what you have is hot off the press. It has the new courses in it that were approved tonight and that is the hard copy of what is available online. It should be updated online as of today. And that is all ready for the registration process. We take that booklet and actually break it down into course offering packets for each grade level. So when they walk into that registration process, they know what's available to take at each grade level. But what you have in front of you is a all-encompassing what's offered here at Pekin High by department. And so those are yours to keep.
Thank you, Dr. Owens. Next item, bond compliance report, Mrs. Schaefer.
Yeah, this report is something new, and this came as a result of our last bond issuance for the health life safety bonds. We're required to issue a post-issuance tax compliance report. I chose to do it this year just kind of in conjunction with the audit report at the same time, just closing out FY14 and to issue this report. This is a template that Stiefel Nicholas actually provided to us, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it does, or do I need to read this as a matter of record? Okay. It basically just states that we have followed all of the post-issuance tax compliance things that we are supposed to do being issued health life safety bonds. In the event that we are ever audited by the IRS to make sure that we're using these tax exempt bonds in compliance with how we are supposed to, this report is something that they'll look to find. So I am presenting this to you tonight to respectfully submit and keep on record in our bond files in the event that we're ever audited.
Key words are in compliance, right?
We are in compliance.
Thank you, Mrs. Schaefer. Next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Is there a particular item the board member would like to see on a future agenda? And if so, mention it now. Hearing none, we'll move on to announcements by the president. First one is a reminder. State law requires that beginning January 1st, 2015, a single email address accessible through hyperlink from the district's homepage be made available for the public to communicate with district elected officials. All members will receive emails sent to this address, which will be, quote, board@pekinhigh.net, unquote. Individual email addresses will be maintained.
Just, Mr. Howard, just to let you know, that should be up and operational hopefully by the end of this week.
Okay? Thank you, Mr. DePatis. The next thing I'd like to mention is Mr. Alessandrini has done a fine job publicizing the Pekin Insurance Holiday Tournament, but I need to mention to you that if you would like tickets to that event, please send an email to Mr. White, and as usual, he'll take care of you. The next thing I'd like to say, hope I don't get in trouble. The establishment clause of the First Amendment prohibits me from wishing you a Merry Christmas. So I simply want to say, on behalf of the Board of Education, I'm sure, I hope that everyone who's hearing my voice has a break that's full of family and friends and food and faith and fellowship. And I hope it's an opportunity to recharge your batteries and come back for a great new calendar year. Something else that will be a little bit different tonight, because of the bond hearing, I've been asked that we have a vote to adjourn this meeting. So I'll be seeking a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley. Motion by Mr. Wrigley and second by Mrs. Hoheimer to adjourn this Board of Education. Mr. White, would you call the roll for the last time this year?
Wrigley,
Aye.
Hoheimer,
Aye.
Alessandrini.
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Rui.
Aye.
And Powell.
Aye. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.